Hi there. I was just thinking, I remember flicking through this old book on alchemy. I'm sure I've seen this in a few other places. This, like a representation of one's own embodiment within the world and within our own minds, our existence, physically, and in terms of the psychology as well, as represented by a house. It comes to mind, I remember some dreams that I had in the past. One in particular where I was becoming not my best self, to be honest. I was becoming, or rather I did some things that were not morally cool. Whether there were reasons for that or not is not something worth going into, but there always are reasons, of course. And I remember having this dream that this house, these sections of the house, you see, this is going to open up more as I talk. There's an old building that I used to work in. It's like a local shopping mall. I used to be a security guard there for 3.5 years, and they were very formative years. I was in my early 20s, and I was turning from a shy young man who just felt very beaten down and just wanted to escape into his own imaginative interests, into being forced to take part in the world, dealing with customers and accidents and shoplifters and all kinds of crazy stuff, and obviously meeting I dated a couple of girls who worked in the shops in that time, and got in trouble sometimes, and it was just a whole very human experience, with all of the intrigue and backstabbing that goes on. It was a crash course in humanity in a way, and it's funny to think that there was a certain amount of authority that we had as well as security guards, and I never sat completely comfortably with that. I did recognize the hypocrisy within the that kind of sort of capitalistic construct, and but sometimes you would get kind of callous with it, because people were often testing your patience, and we were underpaid for what we had to do, etc., etc. And so most of the time I worked days, but sometimes I worked nights. So I would patrol around all of these strange, dusty, sometimes half abandoned, sometimes secret corridors of this very old, when I say old, I don't know, maybe it was built, I could look that up, but I can't right now because I'm making a video. But I know it was there in the 80s, the early 80s, when I was a small boy, this shopping centre. So it predates that. And so as you wandered into the around all these the service area and the backs of the shops and these storerooms, the more neglected it was, the more ancient it would be. Like obviously the further you went towards the actual shop floor, and the shop floor itself would be modernized, and the further you went back, it would get darker and older and more neglected. And it really is like a perfect embodiment of the human psychology. You think about all those places deep within the mind, even if we're thinking about the primal aspects of our evolution, these notions of the lower brain state, and I don't know, what do they call it there, the reptilian mind, and our primal ape-like ancestors, apparently all this kind of stuff. So what happens is that when you're going through spiritual processes on a spiritual journey, this shouldn't surprise, but you can see, you'll start to see why I'm talking about this now. Why this is coming together even as I'm thinking now. As you begin to change mentally and go through new processes, and basically new rooms get added and old rooms get refurbished, that should make complete sense, right? Because this is representative of us. I'm actually drinking water, not coffee. I can't get a gas bottle for my van. There's like a shortage at the moment. Something to do with lockdown, more silliness. So I've got addicted to coffee, which I do not like, because I can't make tea. You know, this is my little house, and yet at the same time not. This is my alchemical vessel. You see, I used to own a house, and I remember all the stress that came with that, but also a sense of security and comfort. You see, when you have those brick walls and you are the official owner of this, well, kind of, with a mortgage, right? You know, of this residence, and you know, the longer you live in it, it becomes more familiar, and it becomes a part of you. So I guess what I'm saying is that you fuse with your environment, with your dwelling, with your home place. Now, this is definitely a cell, and I use that word specifically, a cell for me, a meditation cell, like the origin of the word with the monks' cells in the cathedral or whatever. But you see, this is a mobile cell. Everywhere I go, there's different places, and sometimes it's a bit like sitting in the garden, as you can hear the birds. You know, in the countryside, when I, you know, leave the more suburban areas, there's a sense of loneliness and the true, I don't know, what would you call, you know, that sense when you just look out into a really wide open space and you realise that the world's much bigger than you are. You know that feeling? This tends to increase as you leave the dwelling and leave the town that you're familiar with. I guess what I'm saying is that you're everywhere that you are, that you exist, becomes a part of you. And there's a map of this within the psychology. So if you think this, getting back to this dream that I was having, in this dream, one of the rooms of my house was being refurbished into, I can only describe it as a little bit like that supercomputer in that Superman film. I think it was Superman 3, but I can't remember. Just a great big mechanical metal machine, and there was a room like this, the control room, the security control room in the shopping centre where I used to work, and it was ancient and it had all these wires in the background. I might have spoken about this before actually in a previous video, so I won't go on about that. But see, as I was exploring this shopping centre on my night patrols, and sometimes even in the day, you would just escape to get away from the public for a little bit, and if I was smoking at the time, you'd, you know, have a rollie, and so you'd find the quiet places, whether it was the, you know, like stairwells or storerooms full of chairs and old stuff. And you see, in my dreams, I will keep going back to this place, and there will be new rooms. I will suddenly realize, oh my God, I didn't realize that there's this whole other section. And what quite often happens is, as you wander into this new section, this new room, and not just at this shopping centre, but that's a common one. But there are other places. I find it difficult to describe, because there are places in the dream world I find that you return to repeatedly over years. They don't really exist in the real world, but they look a little bit like something in the real world. But in the dream, you recognise them. Like, I've got this flat, in a particular town, and I've always got like a partner there as well. And there's always a little bit of financial stress going on, and or there's always some kind of stress involved with this dwelling, but I do end up there as well. But anyway, yeah, these new areas open up, and sometimes there's a feeling of presence. I suppose it makes me think of that movie The Shining, you know, all those hotel rooms. This is another thing that we can bring in. I believe that illustrates part of the creative success of that movie. These rooms and that empty, haunting presence. And also this allows us to understand another aspect of haunting in general. I used to live in a haunted house. I still, two actually over the years. There was one when I was a child where we used to live, and you see, again, we would get to the question, how much is the house and how much is it, you know, the people that live there? But nevertheless, in a solid sense, there were two houses where there was a very profound sense of haunting. The second and most recent, obviously, being my old house before I embarked upon this lifestyle of being transient in the van. Although it's kind of complicated because I did rent a room on the same road for a little while either side of that, so it gets kind of complicated. But generally speaking, you know, my old house. And yeah, I still drive past it at times, and I remember those nights, especially in the winter, coming in and the kind of cold damp hanging in the air, and all the bricks were made, they were kind of chalky. So it had a symbolic and a very real physical resonance with the experience in the landscape of Bluebell Hill. Actually, it ties in beautifully, the chalk. And as I said before, it was definitely when there was a heavy rain, when the land was saturated with water, and the chalk meant that the chalky brick meant that this dampness would seep into the house and would kind of hang in the air, and would somehow have an interaction with the old electricity system, which was, I remember the old electric box in the basement. It was ancient, and you could feel a kind of buzzing when you went down there. And so you mix this with winter and a full moon, and anything could happen at any time. But there were these peak times where you know, I come home from work, and you know, you walk in, you knew you weren't alone. And I do miss it. You know, it's funny really. You'd think you'd be frightened, but I was always very comfortable. And just to think that as a child, if you had to get up and go to the loo in the night and you'd seen, like, you know, some movie, or, you know, some scary movie, it would be quite a harrowing experience. Just to think that when there was an undeniable presence / presences existing within the house, especially when you consider the rituals that would have took place there at various times, and a lot of the emotional things going on, and the fact that you know, the family, you know, the divorce and that previous, so all these energies and memories and all these things going on. You know, you get up in the middle of the night, and it never used to bother me, you know. So I, you know, do what I got to do, you know, go down to the kitchen or whatever, come back up, get into bed. I'd lie there, and I had some really, really, really unusual experiences in that place. And it always comes back to that one that really sticks out in the mind is the dead shall rise. The dead shall rise. definitely feel the weight of that statement from that experience, especially right now. But yes, houses, the psychology, the past that haunts us, that haunts our dwellings, our houses, all these things are linked. And when we go through a process of initiation, a kind of shamanic transformation, when we embark upon a magical journey, us and our houses, the houses that we carry within, go through changes and new areas open up, and we may encounter presences and hauntings not only within the dream world but also within the physical world. Coming back to this sense as well as of the places that you inhabit, you see, obviously I spend a lot of time in nature and I do a lot of meditation, my daily practice, which is now 2 hours a day, every day, and with very rare exceptions. I wish I could say it was 100%, but it's as close to 100% as my guilt meter is just, it only just goes, but at the moment it just flickers somewhere around 0. So yeah, but good. See this increase in time within deep consciousness, and these disciplines within the mind, focusing on one thing, or clearing the mind of thoughts, or observing the thoughts. And obviously with the Bardon book, the order would be watching the thoughts, being aware, so the awareness, then the concentration on one specific thought or subject, and then the vacancy, the clearing of the mind. And the chapter that I will read very soon, the chapter 0 of Weird Weaver, which is finished, will tackle these 3 stages of meditation and the changes, not only that do take place, but will take place if coupled with a strong belief, dedication, and just a sense of the inevitability of one's transformation upon the path. So, depending on where you live, where you haunt, this changes the psychological map. So, I have my meditation cell here, my incubation chamber, the white whale, Hermione Trismegistus, as I call her. Quite often obviously I'm at work, I'm cleaning windows, I'm in the countryside. I work in the countryside. So there's a stronger connection with nature. It enables me to be fully pagan. That way I can wander out, into the countryside as I leave the more suburban areas of the countryside. But I'm pretty much always in the countryside. I only need to visit the heavy town, in terms of doctor's appointments or, going to the gym and this kind of stuff. So I will spend most of my time in the kind of suburban countryside, but with access immediately, just a couple of minutes drive to deep countryside and deep woodland. So therefore the structure of my mind begins to take on the form of the countryside, and the wildness of the countryside, and the ancient the haunting of the ancientness, and the subtle but detectable presence of the past, and the you could say the presences of the past, the intelligence of the past, there's going to be a resonance, obviously. And you see, this enables you to understand and to live and to experience a true paganism allied with Hermeticism under the teachings of a truly, what would you call it? A universal path. So it's like the religion, you know, this is a common term with, you know, Bardon, the religion behind all religions, the, you know, a common notion that this is a kind of template that you can come from any particular path and just use these techniques that work when you apply them. And you know, you can apply your own window dressing if you like. So the window dressing, if you're on the internet all day, it's not the same as the real experience of what I'm saying is I realized the value and live the value of being close to nature. So therefore, when you ally the universal training system with the religious tapestry of lived experience within the countryside connected to the hauntology of the past, I'm trying to communicate something here, and making this video is helping me to understand what I'm trying to say, what I'm trying to communicate, and will perhaps help me when I'm trying to, you know, to write this down at a later stage. So basically your mind expands to the area in which you inhabit. So you spend a lot of time in the countryside, the openness. If you imagine almost like your aura, if you wanted to use that word. Sorry, I just got a text there. Yeah, I don't mean this necessarily in the literal sense, although it could be. But if you imagine a kind of aura that expands to encompass a very large natural space, what's that going to do to your internal psychology and your internal mapping and the links that you make? You see, I'm sitting here right now. I'll just turn the camera around for a moment. This is what got me thinking. That kind of, you know, civilization, ancient and wicked kind of vibe. And you see, you can't fault people because, you know, you look at all these nice houses and they put a lot of time into their garden and they clean their car, and you see, this is them. This is not only the external house but the internal house. They're taking care of it, but it's very limited. And when they decorate a new room or they make an extension, they're making this extension psychologically as well. And I'm saying that's fine, but it is also kind of small-minded when you think about it. It's difficult not to be rude here. Sometimes it's you can't avoid being rude. When you're just obsessed with going to work, just owning a building, and you know, it's all about just decorating rooms, sitting in and watching TV, and you know, just generally towing the party line of you know, modern life, you know, the modern dream, if you like. Your mind, not only through your domestication, but through the very experience of your sculpting of your domain, is making your capacity smaller. So that's why it's so important to get out and spend time in nature. And this is something that I had to adjust to, because through my childhood I learned to retreat to a small room. And see, I kind of still get this with my van. I've still got that cubicle that I can just find peace and just close out the world, if you like. But it's always within a wider domain where I'm more often, or very often, sleep doesn't count so much obviously, but I will spend most of my time in very wide open spaces. So this has actually changed, it's transformed that what I used to feel was as if the consciousness was something very small and enclosed, but there was like a crack of light that every now and then I used to get a glimpse of a wider domain. So I'm saying, through the lived experience of being within a wider domain, the internal experience has been widened by definition. Excuse me, I think I've breathed in too much wax. Sometimes I use wax, I mix it with charcoal and use it as a kind of a base for applying incense. And obviously, being in this enclosed space, I'm learning now that I need to do that less, or perhaps open the windows more often. Anyway, so it's goodbye from me, goodbye from him for now, and I will get round to reading that chapter and carrying on with the IIH reading of the entire book. These things will happen in good time, at the right time, and properly done. Don't you agree, birdies? The birdies agree.